Hello and welcome to episode 1 of season 1 of Not Your Typical Solopreneur. And I'm your host, Brittany Kim. I'm so excited that you're here. At the end of this episode, I am going to share kind of like the direction of where the podcast is going to go, like a little bit of a heads up. But what we're going to focus on right now is essentially the heart of what this whole podcast is going to be about. So it really revolves around this one question that I have around entrepreneurship, which is, what does sustainable entrepreneurship actually look like in real life, right? And I think we all have this kind of concept of what a successful entrepreneur is, what that person even looks like, what their life is even like, and also how they obtain that success. I think a lot of us feel like for me to be a successful entrepreneur, I have to hustle, right? Like I need to get up at 5 a.m., do my cold plunge, time block my schedule like crazy, and like somehow just put it all together. And that's just not really realistic for a lot of people's lives. And also, people are successful in a lot of different ways, and they do it in a lot of different ways. And entrepreneurs define success very differently. Some entrepreneurs may define success in the terms of pure income, right? Like pure profit from their business. I'm making, I don't know, like 50K months or something like that. And someone else might define success as I have a quality life, like income that is supporting me and anyone else that I am like providing for. And on top of that, they have some other quality of life factor that is important to them, whether it's I'm not working full time so I can be with my family, or I don't have to work from like 9 to 5. And that gives me the freedom to go to doctor's appointments to take care of my chronic health condition, right? So the definition of success for people is so different. And I think that there's this image of what that person is, what they do, what they achieve, how they do it. And there's so many other people that are actually not the typical picture of what a successful entrepreneur is. And everyone who like doesn't really fit that mold, all the people that maybe aren't like essentially like rising to that like standard that's been set for what is successful will feel like they're failing when they're not, like because their goals, their values, what they're working towards, what they're working on, how they're working on it, all of that is so person specific and business specific. And so this podcast is really dedicated to people who just like don't feel like that typical business advice actually fits like their real life. And so we are going to be talking to founders and different business owners who don't really quite fit that typical picture of what maybe a successful entrepreneur is. We're going to be talking to people with real lives, real problems, real constraints that actually make their business build challenging in so many different ways. And I think being able to hear stories of real life people who don't look like this like stereotypical successful entrepreneur is going to help you feel like you're not alone, first of all. Secondly, that there's actually like a ton of people out there who are just like this, like millions of people, and they're finding ways to be successful. They're finding strategies and solutions that work for them in their own unique way and capacity. And I think the more that we can hear these stories and learn from people and understand what actually works for them in their real life, that's going to be more powerful and useful for you as you are building your own business. The other thing I need to address is the title solopreneur, like that part of the title. In general, we're going to be talking about essentially entrepreneurship. I chose solopreneurship because in particular in this like new era of AI and all of the tech and tools and resources, there's going to be this rise of entrepreneurship, sometimes out of necessity because people like are losing their jobs, and sometimes because it's an opportunity to potentially do something where they could make an income and have the time freedom and the financial freedom and whatever using these tools. And I think what we're going to be seeing is a lot of people who not only are entrepreneurs, but fit kind of this category of solopreneurship. Because, yeah, solopreneur, like by strict definition, is basically one person only who owns the business and runs the business, does all the things in the business. A lot of people who enter entrepreneurship are solopreneurs at the start. And then from there, it just kind of evolves into whatever it does. Now, I want to define, because I think when we even think of like Not Your Typical Solopreneur, I'm not saying like only people who only work by themselves can listen to this show. This is a show about entrepreneurship. But the people that would really benefit from the show in particular are people who are true solopreneurs, people with either incredibly lean teams or people who are contractors sometimes or a fractional CFO, right? We're looking at someone who has essentially a very small business, not many employees, and they are doing a lot of that work or offloading it through things like AI and automation technology and things like that. Even though you feel like you are the outlier in the situation, I guarantee you that what we might define as like not the typical kind of entrepreneur or solopreneur, in fact, is probably more common than we think. And I think it's important that there is a show out there that is talking about things in the context of those real life world problems, because the current kind of just standard business advice, things like you need to be more consistent. And it's like, cool, I have a body that flare ups all the time. Like, there's no way I can do that. Or like me, I have ADHD. It's like, I would love to be more consistent, but my brain has a mind of its own and it decides to do things that I did not intend. Right. So it's, I just think that all of those kinds of advice, while there's some truth to it, it's also just like not obtainable, not applicable. And you can't actually be successful with it because again, you're not that typical solopreneur or an entrepreneur. You are someone who has other things going on that need to be accounted for. And it's so important that you know this, that like if you've ever felt like the outlier or like you just haven't been successful and it's all your fault because people are giving this advice, but you can't keep up with that advice, then I've got to tell you, if that advice isn't working for you, that's the answer, right? Like that advice isn't working for you. And I think it comes down to what is like this next part of what we're going to talk about in this podcast, which is kind of the framework that I'm going to be centering a lot of the discussions around. And I'm going to share a little bit about my background. I am a physical therapist. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. And I've spent the last now over 10 years, almost 11 years, working with people in essentially like the chronic illness, chronic health condition, chronic pain, neurologic, physical therapy realm. And a lot of the work that I have done is to support people who are essentially outliers and people that are frequently misunderstood in the healthcare space and in just society in general, right? A lot of these people have invisible disabilities and navigating that. I'm also an educator. I've done a lot of lecturing and mentorship, primarily with physical therapists and occupational therapists. I also helped start up and like co-run, build, and scale an online education business for PTs and OTs. I stepped away from that now and I'm doing my own thing. And as part of this kind of like interconnection of my experience and background in the online business world and in health and well-being from a healthcare perspective, this is the lens that we're going to be kind of entering into this podcast. And we're going to be combining all of those different things to create something that I think is actually much more useful and integrates all of the different challenges that I think a lot of people who are not that typical kind of entrepreneur or solopreneur may experience. Okay, so where we're going to start is we're going to take a step back and we're actually going to see essentially like how other people are trying to answer the same question. Because like if you're on social media or, like, I don't know, you follow different people or you're reading different things, you hear so much chatter, right? Like there's so many different voices saying, if you want to have a sustainable business, if you want to have a profitable business, these are the same problems. Everyone's trying to solve the same problems, but they're doing it in their own way, in their hot takes and whatever it is, right? And so I just want to start by like kind of exposing all of these different kinds of, I guess, niches to answering the same problem. So I want to start first actually with kind of the health and wellness industry and space. Okay, so like when I enter the health and wellness space, sometimes I'm like, wow, like, it just it's really wild out there sometimes. And so and especially like in this entrepreneur kind of world too. And so there's like different camps, and I'm going to kind of share different ones that I feel like exist out there. There's people who are like, they're like usually like a psychologist in particular. maybe they focus on performance, whether it's like athletic performance or essentially like entrepreneurial like mental health in that way. So there's like this kind of professional lens focusing a lot on like the mental health aspect, mindset, etc. Right. Then there's like this other kind of group that's, I'm going to say, like maybe a little bit more alternative. And they're doing things and talking about things from this like nervous system lens. So it's things like you need to regulate your nervous system. There's lots of talk about like, in order for you to actually like have money in your life, for example, like if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to be making money. So it's like to have money in your life, your nervous system has to be able to accept that, right? Like it can't be dysregulated when it makes money or whatever. And so there's like these kinds of discussions. And then that can get also like even more, I don't know if we want to say like more deeply spiritual with that kind of work. There's also people who like really focus on manifestation type stuff, which can fall under maybe some of this like nervous system meets like mindset work. And then there's this whole other group of people that are like essentially biohackers, right? Like they're trying to physiologically help the entrepreneur be able to perform at their optimal best, right? The common theme over and over and over again here is they're living in this health and wellness space and they're trying to help entrepreneurs have a more sustainable business by taking care of their mental and physical health and well-being, right? And so that makes sense because if you like can't show up for your business because you're physically unwell, or like if you're not performing optimally and you want to have higher performance, then being able to tap into those things that might be underlying that could be really helpful. The challenge is that like I'm going to give the example of like the nervous system regulation stuff. I'm definitely not against nervous system regulation type techniques, but like for some of those like nervous system regulation people, I kind of hear like basically they're like, you have to work on that nervous system regulation. You have to be regulated. You have to keep that nervous system from feeling stressed all the time, right? Or like it's preventing you from making these decisions, taking risks, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think to myself, like you could work on regulating your nervous system all you want, but if you're putting yourself in a situation where you're always dysregulated, you're very highly emotionally dysregulated, you are in fight or flight in a sympathetic mode, or you're in complete shutdown because like whatever it is you're doing in your business is just like sapping the living daylights out of you, or you've chosen a sales strategy or a marketing strategy that is just like highly dysregulating for you and is just not a match, or it's just so much effort, takes so much work, takes so much time, and you don't have that time, and that's creating stress in your life and you're feeling dysregulated. Like, I guess you could sit there and do a full on program where you're only working on your nervous system regulation, or maybe you actually need to be working on those business systems, like the model you've chosen, how you're marketing. Are there solutions around those kinds of things that actually would like not put you in a situation where you do feel dysregulated all the time, stressed all the time, right? And then there's even bigger facets beyond that, which is like, I also think very much so in the health and wellness sphere, the social determinants of health, right? And so if you are someone with a chronic health condition and you don't have health insurance, if you don't have access to the specialists that you need to take care of your health condition, then it's really hard to show up for your business. Like this is bigger than like, okay, like we're going to do some breathing exercises, or we're going to like eat 6 Brazil nuts and then look at the sun in the morning, right? Like these are things that are directly impacting your ability to not just like thrive, but like purely to survive, right? And if you're experiencing things like discrimination, whether it's in the world or in the healthcare context, to actually access care, and maybe that discrimination is influencing a provider's decisions about what you should get for testing or whether you need testing or different types of treatments, like that impacts you directly. It impacts your ability to show up for your business because your health and well-being is impacted. And not having the social support, for example, like to be able to have childcare, like if you don't have access to friends and family, you don't have the finances to pay for that, like how are you going to time-wise show up for your business realistically without burning yourself down to the ground because you're working odd hours, like when your child naps, the classic like mompreneur, like you're building something while your kid naps, or you get up at 5 a.m. or you're doing it while you're like breastfeeding or something at like 3 a.m. Like I applaud those moms doing that. But at the same time, I wonder about, is that sustainable? Is that sustainable? And if you can do that and that is truly okay and sustainable for you, then like good for you. But I know for me, that would not be sustainable, right? And I don't think that's sustainable for everyone. And so the health and wellness kind of lens and trying to understand if entrepreneurship can be sustainable through these different methods, there's some good stuff there. Like there's stuff there. And if those are things that you need to work on, and those are things that are beneficial to you, you pursue that, right? You pursue that because it's helping you. It's giving you what you need to make entrepreneurship sustainable for you. And I just want you to know that if you've been like trying to go down that road and you just feel like you're hitting your head against the wall, like there could be like bigger things in your business or things outside of that at like a societal level or whatever that are also impacting you. And so like you not being able to regulate yourself enough and like you're always dysregulated or whatever, it's like it's not always your fault. There's so many other things going on in the world. Maybe even in like physiologically within you with your health conditions, like might be driving that. So yes, I want to, okay, I'm going to step off my soapbox for a second because now we're going to enter into the next kind of world of like entrepreneurship and advice around how to make your business more sustainable. And this world is, I love it. It's like, it like tickles my brain, but also I love exploring this for myself, is business systems. Okay. So these are the people that are like, I like only worked 4 hours this week and I also made 20K this month or whatever, right? Like they're the people that have the automations or like the banging ads thing to like, I don't know, whatever, right? Like they're doing some like wild stuff to be able to like essentially make more money and spend less time working. So they're working less, making more, and they're using strategic business systems to do this. So obviously very attractive for the entrepreneur and the business owner, because if you are able to make more and work less, that could be beneficial for someone who has a chronic health condition and you need to be able to go to doctor's appointments. You need to afford your life, afford your healthcare, and you need time to be able to go to those appointments. So yeah, a business systems approach would be fantastic. Also for someone doing caregiving. So it could be a parent, or maybe you are caring for aging parents, for example, or just people in your life that need that extra time with you. And so you having the time freedom to be able to do those things can be beneficial, right? And so business systems like world can be super helpful. It's very practical. And then to play devil's advocate again, okay, nice. Like you can work on all these business systems and create this stuff, but like if your health and well-being is really impacted, that still is going, even if you have those systems, like if you want something to be sustainable, you need to take care of your health and well-being as well. Okay. And then I guess I'm going to kind of pull in a third camp. I'm sure there's like many other little like camps and niches within this sphere, but the other camp that I want to focus on are the people that I would kind of define as like, I've heard so many different words for this, like soft business or um, like a like life first kind of business. I don't know. It's something about like basically you want to live like a balanced work-life balance, right? So, and this focuses a lot on people, I think, that either want to live this like really slow, like nice life. There's so much like, it's like nature imagery, or they're like people are like drinking like the slow cup of coffee or like doing painting, or right, like they're enjoying their life. They're really enjoying their life. And or there's usually like, it's like moms or other kinds of parents, right, that like want to be able to have the freedom to work less hours and still either make the same or like maybe even more, right? And they want to do things in a way that also I think is very purposeful. So having a business model that actually is like lights you up, that you enjoy doing, and adds in a lot of this like desire to be, yeah, just doing like meaningful work and connecting with other humans. And so I think this lens is also particularly important because, like, if you are someone who wants to have a sustainable business, you may be defining what that success looks like differently. And I think this is where some people like feel ashamed, like, if they go to some sort of like conference or something and people are like, yeah, I'm making like 20K months and like you need to be pushing yourself harder and all this kind of stuff. And some people might say, I'm actually very content with like if I could hit 10K, that would be really wonderful for me. And as long as I could only, work part-time to do that, and that gives me the freedom to do XYZ, I'm content with that, right? And I think that kind of soft business or like kind of this focus on the season of life that you're in is just really, I think, important to take into consideration. But it requires business systems, right? It requires that you are thinking also about like your health and well-being in that process. It does also contribute to your health and well-being, I think, as well, like being able to pursue meaningful activities and things that like get you into flow state, things that like truly light you up and energize you. This, I think, is something as a healthcare professional that I have seen time and time again. This is kind of more like anecdotal evidence from me as a clinician. The people that I've worked with who just like, I don't know, they have some sort of passion about something, like whether it's advocacy work for the condition that they have, like it could be just like a certain job or people in their lives. And there's something that's like bigger out there for them that they really like live their lives for and they're very passionate about, and it really energizes them. Every time I've had a patient where that's the thing that's most important outside of their health condition, they always seem to do better. I don't know how to explain it, but there's just something I think inherently beneficial for their mental health, maybe even their physical health, in engaging in an activity that is like meaningful, purposeful, and also just like inherently brings them joy. Like they do it because they love to do it, and it gives them great meaning. So I do think that this kind of lens is an important one for us to think about and kind of talk about too. Now, this is where we're going to be focusing in this podcast. Okay, is like there's all these lenses and all these ways that you can be thinking about sustainable entrepreneurship. And in my mind, why are we not looking at it all together, right? Like, and so the framework that we're going to be kind of exploring sustainable entrepreneurship is going to be through this lens of like brain, body, and business, and kind of like all of that fitting within a season of life that you're currently in. And so when I'm talking about this in particular, what I mean is like, I think, especially if you're neurodivergent, your brain is just wired a little bit differently. Understanding how your particular brain works is so helpful, right? Because you could sit there and blame yourself for always forgetting things. I'm speaking from like an ADHD lens. I have ADHD. So, like you can blame yourself for always forgetting things and for letting the ball drop and all that kind of stuff. But like, if you know that executive functioning is really hard for you and you need support, then you can offload some of those things, right? If that's also not something that drives that curiosity or the challenge or, basically all the C's that like enhance your ability to engage and motivate you into a task if you have ADHD, then yeah, like maybe those things shouldn't be on your plate. And like maybe there's ways that you could offload that so that your business can keep running and that you can kind of like lean into what works for your brain. We're going to be talking a lot about like neuroscience type things, applying the literature in a way that's actually like evidence based. And I'm going to be very like open and honest about if I bring in a study, like what is this quality of evidence? How could we actually apply it? But yeah, we're going to be talking about like neuroscience type things. That'll be really fun. Like maybe the neuroscience of creativity. We'll be talking a little bit about like flow state type stuff. We'll also be talking about just how like different brains are wired and how that might like affect whether it's your physical health or also just like your ability to run your business the way that you want to. For the body kind of element, we'll be talking kind of again about like different kind of science related things. I'm also going to be talking about different types of chronic health conditions. And we're also going to discuss a lot about essentially capacity management and working within your capacity. So, there's so many people trying to be productive or like focusing so much on productivity. And when you have a brain or a body that is really unpredictable or also is just like highly inconsistent, focusing on being more productive is actually really not helpful. Understanding what your capacity is, learning how to work with that capacity, learning how you could potentially expand that capacity, whether it's um, like strategically offloading or kind of setting up your nervous system in a way so that you could like function a little bit better, open up that capacity, right? Or is it like we're talking about kind of almost like a performance, like expanding that capacity? So this really applies particularly to people who are maybe neurodivergent, and maybe you have a lot of fatigue or you have kind of like focus challenges. This also will apply to people who do have energy fluctuations. Maybe you have chronic fatigue syndrome or something like that. And thinking about how you could kind of set up your day and also set up like your workflow so that things like basically you can be working with your brain and your body versus like trying to force it to be something that it just isn't. And then we are going to be talking about the business. So we're going to be talking about like business systems, technology, AI, of course. We'll also be talking about I think a really big thing for me in like the online business world. So if you are like a coach or an educator or, like you're selling digital products or something like that, I think what's really important is to think about essentially what your business model is or what your offers are and how you are actually setting those up. So we'll talk about that too, because I think, especially from my experience, the last like 6+ years doing online business and doing things like live launches and teaching live courses or doing on demand courses or memberships or coaching, like all that kind of stuff. I've done all that kind of stuff. And I know how it can be really stressful. I know how it can be something where you thought it was a great idea. Like, oh, this is, I think a lot about memberships in particular, like, oh, I'm going to be able to make more like recurring revenue on a monthly basis. But like, if you make some decisions about setting it up a certain way, then it becomes like, ooh, very exhausting and time consuming, right? So yeah, we're going to be talking about these like different kinds of strategies and things. And it's going to be really all focused on that one question, which is, how can you set up your business so that it is more sustainable for you? And what does sustainable actually mean within your own personal context? So that's kind of it for, I think, this episode. And that's where we'll start. And this is kind of like the stage that we're setting for all of our future episodes. Okay. Now, quick heads up. So, in line with kind of like this philosophy that I have about trying to pursue sustainable entrepreneurship, this podcast is actually a very good example of how I'm applying this in my own business and in my own real life. So I'm one of those people, if you don't know much about me, I'm one of those people that's very all or nothing and also very high achievery. So basically, when I was like, I think I want to start a podcast because short form content has just been like so difficult. I feel like I'm constipated with like what to create because I think I'm actually normally more of a long form content kind of person. Okay. So I said to myself, I'm going to start a podcast. That sounds fun. And I also somehow simultaneously decided to commit for the rest of my life doing weekly episodes and, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then the one thing that I think I've learned, and I think this is kind of a little nugget for you to take if you are this kind of all or nothing kind of person, is the one thing that I've learned consistently over the last like 6+ years of doing online business and leaping into things that I really wasn't like, or maybe I really shouldn't have leaped into and like committed to, is I now always, if I'm going to do something new, I give myself permission to exit, like have an off ramp. And so I'm committing to one season and then I'm going to decide whether I want to continue, whether it works for me, something that like lights me up, something that energizes me, something that works for my business, benefits people, creates the impact that I want to create. I have different goals around what I want to do with this podcast. And so if it's meeting those goals and I love doing it, it gives me energy, then I'm going to continue doing it, right? But we're going to do one season together. I'll evaluate it for myself. I have this feeling I'm going to continue, by the way. I just like, it's just more like I always like to give myself permission. And then we'll kind of see how it evolves. So season 1 is going to be what it is. Season 2 might be a little new and different. And that's going to really depend on you. And so I want to hear from you, feedback or things you want to learn about, people you want to be interviewed on the show. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to chat about that. And it's something that I think, if you are someone who has that all or none kind of thinking pattern, I'd encourage you to really start considering how can you give yourself permission. And I think for me, the thing that really helps me is also including transparency. So I'm sharing with you right now, like I'm sticking with one season. Here's why, right? And that allows me to feel like I'm being true to myself. I'm being honest with you about what it is that's going to be happening and what's going on. And it creates this little container of, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on and what I'm going to work on. And I'm going to determine whether it's something I can continue or something I would like to discontinue. So that's my little nugget for you today, is maybe to think about what are some areas in your business, or if you have lots of new ideas, like if you have ADHD like me, then maybe thinking about, well, if you really want to explore one, how could you set it up in a way that gives you permission to have an off ramp and to do that like very graceful exit if you choose to do that. All right, subscribe to the podcast. I'm going to have this on YouTube and most of the major like podcast stations. So subscribe to the podcast so that you make sure that you get all of the future episodes, and stay tuned for the next couple of episodes. I thank you so much for listening, and I hope you continue on this journey with me as we kind of explore this idea of what sustainable entrepreneurship looks like. And until next time, I hope that you remain not the so typical solopreneur.